Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. This is the weekly news wrap-up for 12/21/12. Yes, the end of the Mayan calendar. More about that in just a minute. But no, the world is not going to end. First up, don't expect a deficit debt deal before Christmas. It's just not going to happen. You know, the fiscal cliff, to me, looks like we're going to go over the fiscal cliff. And all what's really going on is jockeying for to who can get the blame. Can we put the blame on the Republicans? Can we put the blame on the Democrats? If we do cut a deal, can we have most of the nastiness of the deal fall on the Democrat space? Hey, can we have most of it fall on the Republican space? That's what this is about. Even Erskine Bowles meant $4 trillion in the next 10 years to the economy, and that only slowed the growth of government. The deal they're talking about to avoid the fiscal cliff is a couple of $1 trillion over 10 years. That's basically nearly virtually meaningless. And we may get nothing. That may be the best thing. At least we'll get some cuts, have some tax increases, we'll get the actual real cuts to programs. But listen, there is no easy path for the economic problems the United States faces. They are enormous. That's why the Federal Reserve is now full on printing out of thin air $85 billion a month. $40 billion a month is just to bail out the banks in an ongoing banker bailout. Not a word said about that. Oh no, not a word, not a single word. But what the president has come up with, and to me, is like they're taking a disaster and make a political hay out of it. You know, to attack the Constitution. Again, we've already knocked out the Fourth Amendment, which is due process for American citizens. They can stick a bag over your head and drag you off. That was provided in his signing of the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, indefinite detention. And what he wants is he's demanding a gun plan, demanding it. And then here is Mayor Bloomberg. He's all in for the gun plan. Let me tell you about Mayor Bloomberg's New York City. I lived there for nearly 10 years. You can't have a gun, very difficult to have a gun. Okay, that's fine. If you do have a gun in New York State, you can't shoot somebody who kicks in your door. They want you to crawl out on the fire escape. They want you to run out the back door with your family. Even if it's 5 below zero, you have to flee. Oh, by all means, let's not do anything to any criminal that's attacking you. Now, this Newtown Elementary School shooting is a disaster, but, it is a mental health issue as much or more than a gun issue. And here is USA Today. Of course, they did a big investigation, Virginia Tech, Fort Hood, Aurora, Sandy Hook. Of course, Fort Hood, right here, Fort Hood. That's a military base, and that's a terrorist attack. And they did a story about mass killings. Of course, in their own article, they say that a third of the mass killings didn't happen with a gun. Of course, there's no talk about all the people who stopped crime by the legal use of a firearm. For example, there was a happening out in Oregon where a gunman was going to open fire at a mall, and he was stopped by a armed citizen with a concealed carry. No worry about that. No talk about that whatsoever. And so, there's no talk about the enormous financial crime, the enormous, extent that we've gone through to bail out the banks. I mean, the inflation that printing $85 billion a month, open-ended, that's a well-stated policy of the Federal Reserve now. Can you imagine what's going to happen to society when the buying power of the dollar shrinks? When people are struggling to put gas in their tank, people are struggling to put food on their table, people are struggling to pay the new tax for Obamacare. I mean, that's what we need to address in the country. You think that we have violence now. Man, if the economy blows up, and I think that's what we're cruising for. That's even what David Stockman says. The dollar's going to crash, and he's a former White House budget director, and the Treasury bonds are going to crash. I mean, if we have to live within our means, and all of a sudden we have to only spend the $2 trillion that we take in, not $3 trillion. We only spend $2 trillion. Can you imagine all the cuts, the real cuts that are going to happen? Can you imagine the instability in society? I mean, nothing kills democracy faster than inflation. And that's what needs to be addressed. What's not addressed, and what the USA Today won't address, They'll address this gun thing, but they will not address anything, the crimes of these banks. Of course, I'm sure that, that J.P. Morgan Chase and Goldman Sachs being big shareholders in Gannett, which is the parent company of the newspaper, I'm sure that has nothing to do with their coverage. But just recently, let's just take a look at what happened. J.P. Morgan Chase last month, paid a $300 million fine from the FCC for, fraudulent mortgage-backed securities. It just paid a fine. We had, HSBC pay a nearly $2 billion fine for, get this, money laundering for drug cartels and terrorists. They paid it. Nobody goes to jail over that. UBS paid a nearly $1.5 billion fine for the global rate rigging fraud of LIBOR, London Interbank Offered Rate, where up to $800 trillion in transactions are set. They just pay a fine. Nobody goes to jail. In HSBC, do you know why regulators said they didn't prosecute them criminally? They're afraid the global system would implode. That's why the Federal Reserve is desperately printing $85 billion each and every month to infinity. If we had a real recovery, which this newspaper has been telling us over and over again we have it, we wouldn't need interest rates set at zero up to 2015. We wouldn't need to print $85 billion a month. We wouldn't have to have a dollar swaps, which we have no idea what's going on in Europe with dollars and the Federal Reserve and the and euros. You want to see the economy? You want to see violence take off? Put the squeeze on people and make them struggle. And then you want to take away people's rights to defend themselves? Unbelievable. That's what needs to be addressed. The economy and how bad things will get when people are broke and starving and struggling. You think this violence that we've had in this country is bad now? You haven't seen anything yet, and that's really what needs to be addressed on a grand scale. Finally, the Mayan calendar. I'm not an expert on this, but I've done a little studying. It's really the end of about a 5,300-year cycle, a little more than a 5,000-year cycle. It's also the end concurrently with another cycle, a 26,000-year cycle. It's the alignment. This is an astrological fact. It's an alignment of the sun and the earth to the Milky Way. It's an alignment that only happens once every 26,000 years. Is the earth going to end? No. That doesn't mean that bad things can't happen. But the earth is not, it's not the end of the world. Obviously, you're watching the Weekly News Wrap-Up here. And finally, the last thing I want to get in is I want to thank everybody. I put a donations button on the site, a little more than a month ago, and some people have used it. I really appreciate you helping out USA Watchdog. That money goes directly to helping run and offset the expenses of this site. And I want to thank everybody, whether you gave or not, for coming to the site and supporting USAWatchdog.com. Thank you very much. That's the way I see it. I'm Greg Hunter.